Chapter 1. I was a 3-year-old arsonist. Call me Ishmael. I won't answer to it, because it's not my name. But it's much more agreeable than most of the things I've been called. Call me that weird chick who says fuck a lot is probably more accurate, but Ishmael seems classier, and it makes a way more respectable beginning than the sentence I originally written, which was about how I'd just run into my gynecologist at Starbucks, and she totally looked right past me like she didn't even know me. So I stood there, wondering whether that's something she does on purpose to make her clients feel less comfortable, or whether she just genuinely didn't recognize me without my vagina. Either way, it's disconcerting when people who've been inside your vagina don't acknowledge your existence. Also, I want to clarify that I don't mean without my vagina, like I don't have it with me at that time. I didn't have it with me at that time. I just meant I wasn't, displaying it while at Starbucks. It's probably understood. I thought I should clarify, since it's the first chapter, and you don't know much about me. So, just to clarify, I always have my vagina with me. It's like my American Express card, in that I don't leave home without it, not that I use it to buy things. This book is a true story about me and my battle with leukemia, and spoiler alert, in the end, I die. So you could just read this sentence and pretend that you read the whole book. Unfortunately, there's a secret word somewhere in this book, and if you don't read all of it, you won't find out that secret word. And then the people in your book club will totally know that you stopped reading after this paragraph, and will realize that you're a big, fat fake. Okay, fine. The secret word is sausages. The end. Still there? Good. Because the secret word isn't really sausages. I don't even know how to spell leukemia. This is a special test that you can see who really read the book. If someone in your book club even mentions sausages or leukemia, they are a liar, and you should make them leave because they probably frisk them as you're throwing them out, because they might have stolen some of your silverware. The real secret word is fork. Footnote: fork is not really the secret word. There isn't actually a secret word, because this is a book, y'all, not a fucking spy movie. I grew up a poor black girl in New York, except replace black with white and New York with rural Texas. The poor part can stay. I was born in Austin, Texas, which is known for its popular Keep Austin Weird campaign, and since I've spent my whole life being pigeonholed as that weird girl. I ended up fitting in there perfectly and lived happily ever after. The end. This is probably what would have been the end of my book if my parents hadn't moved us away from Austin when I was 3. I have pretty much no memory of Austin, but according to my mom, we lived in a walk-up apartment near the military base, and late at night, I would stand up in my crib, open the curtains, and attempt to wave soldiers on the street up to my room. My father was one of those soldiers at the time, and when my mom told me this story as a teenager, I pointed out that perhaps she should have appreciated my getting him off the streets like that. Instead, she and my father moved my crib away from the window because they were concerned I was developing an aptitude for that kind of trade. Apparently, I was really distraught about the whole arrangement because the very next week I shoved a broom into the living room furnace, set it on fire, and ran through the apartment screaming and swinging the flaming torch around my head. Allegedly. I have no memory of this at all, but if it did happen, I suspect I'm probably waving it around like some sort of kind of awesomely patriotic flaming baton. To hear my mother tell it, it was like I was viciously brandishing it at her, like she was Frankenstein's monster, and I was several angry villagers. My mother refers to this as my first arson episode. I refer to it as a lesson in why rearranging someone else's furniture is dangerous to everyone. We've agreed to disagree on the wording. Shortly after that incident, we packed up and moved to a small, violently rural town of Wall, Texas. My parents claimed it was because my dad's enlistment had ended, and my mom found herself pregnant with my little sister and wanted to be closer to family. But I suspect it was because they realized that there was something wrong with me, and believed that growing up in the same small West Texas town that they had grown up in might change me into a normal person. This was one of the many things that they were wrong about. Other things that they were wrong about: the existence of the tooth fairy and the timeless appeal of fake wood paneling, the wisdom of leaving a 3-year-old alone with a straw broom and a furnace. If you compared the Wall, Texas of today with the Wall, Texas of my childhood, you would hardly recognize it, because the Wall, Texas of today has a gas station. And if you think having a gas station is not that big of a deal, then you're probably the kind of person who grew up in a town that has a gas station and that doesn't encourage students to drive into school in their tractors. Wall is basically a tiny town with, dirt? There's a lot of dirt, and cotton, and gin, but not the good kind. In Wall, when people refer to gin, they're talking about the cotton gin, which is the only real business in this town, and is like a factory that turns cotton into something else. I honestly have no idea. Different cotton, maybe? I never actually bothered to learn, because I always figured that within days I'd be escaping from this tiny country town, and it's pretty much how I spent my entire life for the next 20 years. Our yearbook theme one year was simply, "Where's Wall?" Because it was the question you get every time you told somebody you lived there. And the original and more apt theme had been, "Where the fuck is Wall?" The yearbook teacher quickly shot down that concept, saying that age-appropriate language was important, even at the cost of journalistic accuracy. When I was asked where Wall was, I would always answer with a vague, "Oh, that direction," with a wave of my hand, and I quickly learned that if I didn't immediately change the subject to something to break their train of thought, my personal standby was, "Look, sea monsters!" And the inevitable and often incredulous follow-up question of, "Why Wall?" And you were never entirely sure whether they were asking why the hell you chose to live there, or why anyone would choose to name a town Wall. But it didn't actually matter, because no one seemed to have a legitimate answer for either. Unfortunately, pointing out sea monsters was neither subtle nor believable, mostly because we were completely landlocked. So instead, I began compensating for Wall's beigey blandness, by making up interesting but unverifiable stories about the small town. "Oh, Wall?" I'd say with what I imagined was a sophisticated sneer. "It was a city that invented the dog whistle," or "It's a town that Footloose was based on. Kevin Bacon is our national hero," or "I'm not surprised you've never heard of it. It was the scene of one of the most gruesome cannibalistic slaughters in American history. We don't talk about it, though. I shouldn't even be mentioning it. Let's never speak of it again." I'd hoped that one of the last would give me an air of mystery and make people fascinated with our lurid history, but instead, it just made them concerned about my mental health. And eventually, my mother heard about all my tales and pulled me aside to tell me that no one was buying it, and that the town was most likely named after someone whose last name happened to be Wall. I pointed out that perhaps he'd been named that because he was a man who invented walls, and she sighed impatiently, pointing out that it was hard to believe that a man had invented walls when most of them couldn't even be bothered to close the bathroom door when they're using it. She could tell that I was disappointed at the lack of anything remotely redeeming about our town, and conceded half-heartedly that perhaps the name came from a metaphoric wall, designated to keep something else out. Progress was my guess. My mother suggested that it was more likely boll weevils. I sometimes wonder what it would have been like to have a childhood that was not like mine. I have no real frame of reference, and when I questioned strangers, I found that their childhood generally had much less blood in it. And also, that strangers seem really uncomfortable when you question them about their childhood. But really, what else are you going to do when you talk in line at the liquor store? Childhood trauma seems to be the natural choice, since it's the reason why most of us are in line there to begin with. I've found, though, that people are more likely to share their personal experiences if you go first. So that's why I keep an 11-point list of what went wrong in my childhood to share with them. Also, I usually crack open a bottle of tequila to share with them, because alcohol makes me less nervous, And also because I'm from the South. And in Texas, we offer drinks to strangers even when we're waiting in line at the liquor store. In Texas, we call it Southern hospitality. The people who own the liquor store call it shoplifting. Probably because they're Yankees. I'm not allowed to go back to that liquor store. Footnote: my editor informs me that this doesn't really count as a chapter because nothing relevant happens in it. I explained that it's because this is really just an introduction to the next chapter, and probably should have been combined with the next chapter, but I separated because it's always nice to have short chapters that you can quickly finish so you can feel better about yourself. Plus, if your English teacher assigned you to read the first 3 chapters of this book, you'll already be finished with the first 2. And in another 10 minutes, you can go watch movies about sexy, glittery vampires or whatever the hell you kids are into nowadays. Also, you should thank your English teacher for assigning you this book, because she sounds badass. You should probably give her a bottle from the back of your parents' liquor cabinet to thank her for having the balls to choose this book over the Red Badge of Courage. Something single malt. You're welcome, English teachers. You totally owe me one. Wait. Hang on. It just occurred to me that if the English teachers assign this book as required reading, that means that the school district had to buy a ton of my books. So technically, I owe you one, English teachers. Except that now that I think about it, my tax dollars paid for those books, so technically I'm kind of paying for people to read my own book, and now I don't know whether to be mad or not. This footnote just turned into a goddamn word problem. You know what? Fuck it. Just send me half of the malt liquor you get from your students, and we'll call it even. Also, is this the longest footnote in history ever? Answer: probably.